It doesn't start with pain or fear or light. It starts with distance, a subtle shift between you and the world, between sound and meaning, between breath and awareness. You are still alive. Your heart still beats, but something in your perception begins to loosen. Let's talk about the approach of death, not as a moment, but as a process, because death doesn't arrive like a guillotine. It creeps. And long before the body shuts down, the mind begins to change. Not in ways you expect, not in screaming, not in darkness, but in dreams. Let's talk about the final drift. People nearing death often describe strange things. They see rooms that don't exist, talk to people long gone, have vivid dreams more real than waking life. And they know they're dying, but they're not afraid. They whisper things like, "It's almost time. They're waiting for me. Don't be scared," as if they're stepping into something familiar. Let's talk about terminal lucidity. There are cases documented, studied, where people with dementia, people who haven't spoken in weeks, suddenly wake up, clear, present, alive. They say goodbye. They give one final message, and then they're gone. No one knows why. Some call it neurological noise. Some call it spiritual clarity. But whatever it is, it feels like the mind pulling itself together for one last breath. Let's talk about deathbed visions, not metaphors, not hallucinations, experiences. People report seeing loved ones who've already died, not as ghosts, but as visitors. Sometimes they stand at the foot of the bed. Sometimes they speak. Sometimes they only watch. And the dying don't question it. They recognize them. They smile, as if death isn't an end, but a reunion. Let's talk about the disintegration of time. As the body begins to fail, the brain lets go of sequence. Memories blur. Moments fold. Past, present, future, they blend. You're 8 years old again. You're walking through a childhood street, but you know you're old and dying, and none of it feels wrong because linear time was never real to your nervous system. It was just a structure. And now that structure is collapsing, let's talk about cross-sensory experiences. Near the end, people begin to see music, feel light, hear colors. It sounds like madness, but maybe it's integration. Maybe the brain, knowing it's shutting down, opens all its doors at once. No more boundaries, no more categories, just raw perception, bleeding together, like the final stroke of a painting. Let's talk about the loosening of the ego. You stop referring to yourself the same way. You say, "We're going." You speak of yourself as if you're already part of something else. The I becomes us. The self begins to dissolve. And strangely, it feels like relief. Let's talk about the emotional detachment. You're surrounded by family. You love them, but the pull is elsewhere. It's not cold. It's not rejection. It's not fear. It's peace. As if the emotional bonds that held you to this world are gently, softly releasing. Let's talk about the dreamlike quality of dying. You're not awake, not asleep. You drift. You see strange landscapes. You hear voices from beneath memory. You feel a presence you can't describe. And for the first time in your life, you don't need to understand. You just let go. Let's pause here. You thought death would be loud, violent, final. But the mind, when left to its own ending, does not scream. It drifts. It remembers. It dreams. And in that final dream, you begin to feel that maybe you were never really alone. You close your eyes, but you're not asleep. Your body is failing. Your breath shallow. Your pulse erratic. And yet, your mind is somewhere else entirely. not blank, not gone. Elsewhere, let's talk about the strange world that opens up in the final hours. Because death, for many, is not a black wall. It's a place, a dream, a landscape. Let's talk about the deathscape, the symbolic realm that dying people often describe with eerie consistency. There's a tunnel, a light, a bridge, a river, a road, not always, but often enough to ask, why? Are these symbols just stories the brain tells itself as it fades? Or are they something more? Let's begin with the tunnel of light. It's the most famous image. A corridor, dim, long, and at the end, a light so soft and welcoming, it doesn't feel like light at all. People say it feels like being pulled, not dragged, drawn. They float. They move without effort, and they're not afraid. The light isn't just brightness. It's warmth, understanding, a sense of total knowing. Let's talk about what the brain is doing. As oxygen depletes, your visual cortex floods with electrical activity. You see patterns, shapes, light, but it's not just biology. The images aren't random. They have structure, direction, meaning your subconscious, free from logic, untethered from time, begins to assemble one last story. Not for survival, but for departure. Let's talk about guides. Many people, even those who were not religious, describe meeting someone, a presence, a figure, sometimes a deceased parent, sometimes a stranger, sometimes a being made of nothing but light. They don't speak with words. They don't command. They welcome. They say, it's okay. You're safe. You can come now. And again, there's no fear, only recognition, as if this is someone you've always known, but forgot. Let's talk about life review, another common element. Suddenly, your whole life unfolds, not in scenes, but in emotion. You feel what others felt. You relive moments, not just through your eyes, but through theirs. You feel the pain you caused, the love you gave, the things left unsaid, and strangely, you don't judge yourself. You witness, not as a person, but as something larger, observing, accepting, letting go. Let's talk about the dream logic of dying. The spaces are impossible. You walk through doors that lead to forests. You fall through memories like trapdoors. You talk to people without mouths. Time bends, places melt, and it all feels right because you're no longer perceiving through the lens of survival. You're perceiving through release. The conscious mind is quiet now. The symbolic mind has taken over, and his language is myth, emotion, metaphor. Let's talk about the feeling of homecoming. This is the most haunting part. Many people describe the end of the dream as a return to something they can't name, but that feels like home, not a place, not a person, a state, as if they've been here before, as if everything up to now was just a journey to get back. Let's talk about why it matters. You think death is the great unknown, the thing to fear, the wall you must hit alone, but those who approach it and speak before they pass often say the same thing. It's beautiful. It's not what I thought. I'm okay. Let's pause here. You thought death was a vanishing, a shutdown, but perhaps it's a dream, a final, sacred hallucination built by your deepest self to carry you across the border between what was and what might be. You've let go. Your body is still. Your breath is shallow, slow, almost gone. And your mind, it's no longer tethered. Not to identity, not to memory, not to fear, You're not dreaming anymore. You're crossing, but to where? Let's talk about the threshold, the final edge of consciousness. Because there is a moment recorded in faces, in final expressions, in the whispered words of the dying, that feels like more than just biology. Eyes widen, lips part, some smile, some weep, some whisper, oh, as if they saw something that cannot be described. And then they fall silent. Let's talk about what may lie beyond the final image. Neurologically, this is when the brain is collapsing, the last surges of activity, the electrical storms, the dying waves. But there is a paradox. Some report awareness even after clinical death. Brain waves, sensory flashes, dreamlike visions, within minutes of a heart that has already stopped. Let's talk about the post-conscious window. For a brief time, after the body begins to shut down, consciousness doesn't disappear. It unfolds, unbound by pain, unbound by gravity, unbound by identity. People revived from near death often describe floating, looking down at their bodies, drifting into vastness. No form, no fear, just space and peace. Let's talk about the door, because many describe it, not metaphorically. A door, a gate, a veil, a line, and behind it, not heaven, not fire, not certainty, but something profoundly familiar. The feeling of having been there before, not as a person, but as awareness. And maybe that's the terrifying beauty of death. It's not new. It's a return. Let's talk about identity dissolution. You stop being you, not in a violent way, not in fear. In release, your name slips away. Your story melts. Your sense of self no longer matters. You become sensation, then presence, then nothing but awareness. No borders, no face, just being, and it doesn't hurt. In fact, it may be the most peaceful state you've ever felt. Let's talk about the mystery. You want answers. You want to know, is this real? Or just neurons dying? Is there something after? Or does it all end in dust? But death doesn't give answers. It gives silence. And in that silence, something feels true. Not provable, not shareable, but true. A feeling so deep, so beyond words, that it doesn't need explanation. It just is. Let's talk about those who returned. Not the liars, not the dramatics, the quiet ones, the ones who don't tell stories. They come back changed, calmer, softer, less afraid, because they saw the edge, and the edge didn't scream. It whispered, and what it said was not, "You're ending." It said, "You're free." Let's pause here. You thought death was a wall, an erasure, an enemy, but maybe death is a hand letting go of your chest. Maybe it's a dream so deep, you finally stop trying. And in that stopping, you feel what life never let you feel. Stillness, not empty, not numb, but full of a silence that holds you without needing to explain anything.